We know that Jesus must have walked miles up and down the land we now call Holy Land. But there is no mention of him ever riding upon an animal before. But now, he gives this unusual command to go into the village to get a colt, a young donkey, that had never been ridden, and to bring it to him. It must have seemed very strange indeed. It's obvious, though, that Jesus knew what he was going to face in the city of Jerusalem. So his decision to go into Jerusalem must have been one of the most difficult Jesus ever made. And on top of that, to ride into the city on a donkey rather than to walk into it as he had often done before must have been even more difficult a decision. Because riding a donkey into the city was a public declaration that he was a king. 500 years earlier, the prophet Zechariah had proclaimed that fact. 500 years earlier, when he wrote, "Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout, daughter of Jerusalem. See, your king comes to you, riding, having salvation, gentle, riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey." In war, conquerors were on chariots or upon prancing stallions. But in times of peace, the king would ride a colt to symbolise that peace prevailed. And so for Jesus to ride into Jerusalem, I can say it, I won't say it again, upon a donkey, is that he is king proclaiming peace. Of course, that was the beginning of the great 8-day Passover festival, when the Jews remembered God's deliverance from Egyptian slavery. And Jews from all over the world were gathered in Jerusalem to celebrate, and the city was filled to overflowing. Obviously, Jesus wasn't the only in Jerusalem for the Passover. Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, had already entered Jerusalem to occupy the Antonia fortress and the Praetorium with a full complement of elite and battle-hardened Roman soldiers, ever ready and willing to suppress any attempted uprising against Roman rule that might occur. Herod Antipas, Tetrarch, the king and ruler of and Perea, the one who imprisoned and beheaded John the Baptist, had also arrived with great pomp and ceremony, undoubtedly occupying the palace of his father, Herod the Great. Such power and pageantry the people were seeing that week. And then here comes Jesus, fulfilling the prophecy, riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. How would the people respond to that? Would they recognise that his kingdom was not of this world? but it was a spiritual kingdom, and that he was to be a spiritual king. Because he'd been teaching them that for over 3 years. They had not learned that lesson. When Jesus entered the city, great crowds had collected on both sides of the road. They had cut down the palm, shouting, "Hosanna to the King." Excitement prevailed throughout the whole city. And Jesus must have realised as he listened to their hosannas that soon the sinister voices would drown out the voices of love. That those crying for him to be king would soon be crying, "Crucify him," or would simply stand aside and say nothing at all. They were all there in Jerusalem. The loving faces, the sinister faces, the anxious apostles, crowds trampling almost one upon another, when suddenly the whole stopped. And this is what caught my attention this week. The whole procession stopped. And I could hear people way back in the crowd that day saying, "What's going on? What's the hold-up? Why have we stopped?" But the people who were closest to Jesus could see, and they realised that it was he who had stopped the parade. And they saw his face, and they saw in his face sorrow and tears. He was crying. And he looked at them. He saw the mixture of faces and the masses of humanity crowding there, and he realised the emptiness of their lives. They had not heard the message. They did not understand the purpose of his coming. And we read in Luke 19, as he approached Jerusalem and saw the city, Jesus wept over it, and he said, "If you, even you, had only known on this day what would bring you peace. But now it is hidden from your eyes." They had eyes, but they didn't see. They had ears, but they didn't hear. They missed the whole point of that God had given to them. And the fact they waved palm, that they by waving palm branches, they were showing that they expected Jesus to be Lord, another general of the armies, one who would lead them to overthrow the Romans. And they were saying that they were ready to pick up their swords and their shields and go to war if he would lead. But Jesus said, and we find this in Matthew 5, "I didn't come for that purpose. I came to show you a more excellent way. I came to show you a way of love." He had said, love your enemies, and pray for those who persecute you. Those people who listened to him must have thought, well, those are beautiful words, but surely he doesn't mean Rome. He doesn't expect us to love. Only a lunatic would command you to love Rome. We cannot and will not love Rome. For in actual, and we can see that that's exactly what he was. Love even Rome, because Rome, with her mighty arm and power of the sword, but Rome has not seen the power of love. Show them love. The nation of Israel had the opportunity to show Rome something new and different. But because they didn't understand Jesus, because they completely misunderstood his mission, Jesus wept. He wept over them because the would be taken away and they would never have it again. These were God's people, God's chosen people. God had loved them and he'd led them across the wilderness and land. But they didn't understand the Messiah when he came and walked in their midst. And because of that, Jesus wept. How different their lives could have been. How different the history of Israel could have been if they'd only recognised the one who came riding on a colt. Today, like the city of Jerusalem, we find ourselves in the presence of Jesus. I wonder what he finds when he looks into our faces. What he finds when he looks into our hearts. Does he see people concerned so much with many things? Worried about finances, worried about job security, worried about our health or lack of it, worried about the future? Does he see people who are so busy with things here and there, busy that they never bother to consider those things that actually are eternally important? See people who recognise him for who he is, the Messiah, the Christ, the Son of God. Do we claim him as King? Is he Lord of our lives this morning? Have we given him the glory? Or do we just enter his place and sing the words and like wave our branches? When he looks into our lives, I wonder, does he weep today because of what he sees? Or will he have pure joy as we respond to his outstretched arms? How do we respond this morning?